Hello, this is Alejandro Bratti from Believe in Yourself, Believe in Your Business, and welcome to the Spanglish World Networks on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores and iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free and is available in Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Roku, and all smart TVs. Today, I am happy to have Tony Acosta. Thank you for being here with us. How are you, Tony?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. And for me, it's I am going to be like one of the first fans that are going to be listening to you because the topic is very interesting. It's something that I am not used to, the real estate world. I am more used to the part of the podcasting, but mixing both things for me is like very, very interesting. So happy to be also here listening and learning from you.
Absolutely.
So let's start, Tony, with what are you doing now? What is like the different areas, if you have different areas in your business that you are working on? And then we are going to start to go back in your life to start to see how you develop those skills and that passion.
Absolutely. So at the moment, I've been in the real estate industry for about 12 years, and we'll talk a little bit more about kind of my background. Right now, I have my broker license here in the state of Utah, and I'm a member of the largest team, the largest producing team in the state of Utah. And so, that's been a journey, but it's a lot of fun. So I still do real estate. Real estate is my main business, if you will. At the same time, I'm head organizer for TEDx here in my county. And so we put on TEDx events, we train speakers, we help organize all of the logistics and the crowd and the events and the venue. And so the combination of those two between the events and communication training on the TEDx side and the real estate on the other side keeps me pretty busy.
Wow. And how do you mix both? Because it's like they seems to be like completely separate and different things, at least traditionally.
Yeah, no doubt. So for me, I reached a point in my real estate career where I wanted to learn to be a better communicator. One of the things that I realized and that I've learned is that in sales, regardless of what you're selling, whether it's real estate or insurance or cars or whatever it is, communication is the most important variable, because you can have the best product in the world, but if you're not a good communicator, then nobody's going to know about it, right? And so early in my career, I was trying to find ways to become a better communicator, a better speaker. And so one thing kind of led to another. I went to Toastmasters events. Eventually, I came across TEDx, the dream of being a TEDx speaker. And the opportunity presented itself to start a chapter here in my county, because here in my county, there is no established chapter. So in me getting involved with some of the other chapters in Utah, the opportunity presented itself. And so it has really allowed me to improve my own communication skills, improve the way that not only that I communicate with other agents, but also buyers and sellers. So the communication aspect has been pivotal in any success that I've been able to have.
So, and I love that. And I believe this is going to be very interesting. Anybody that is listening to us, if you're in any of the social medias and you have any questions, you are more than free to put it there, and we're going to be answering any question that you may have. So if not, we welcome you and thank you for being here with us. Tony, let's go back in your life, like maybe some of the moments that started to create this desire for selling, desire for communication. Like it can be when you were a kid and you needed milk from your mom. I don't know, from to any other part that you want to express or tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my realization of the importance of communication started when I was very young. I am the oldest of four. And growing up, my parents have very different communication styles. They're complete opposites. So my mother is very fiery. She's loud. She's in your face. She is that stereotypical Hispanic mom that is just loud and will curse at you and yells at you. That's my mother. My father is the complete opposite. My father is very quiet, very reserved. He doesn't like confrontation. He doesn't like to engage. He kind of retreats from uncomfortable conversations. So me being the oldest of four, those differences caused my parents to clash quite a bit. And so me being the oldest, I found myself from a very early age, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, basically playing referee to these arguments between my parents. Because unfortunately, they just weren't able to develop the ability to communicate with each other. And so it was a situation of mom would say this and this and this. I would go to dad and say, hey, dad, mom said this. So I was kind of the messenger back and forth on many occasions. And so what I learned from that over years is that two people can go through the exact same experience and have a wildly different interpretation. And I saw up close the consequences of not learning how to communicate. Ultimately, my parents' marriage failed. And I feel that the reason that it failed is because they were never able to do that. And so from that point on, whether it was in my own relationships, certainly in my business, I really made it a strong point of emphasis to learn how to communicate, to learn how to talk to people, to be able to get ideas across. And so I've gone to great lengths to try to improve that, from podcasting, being on stage, training other agents. And I have found it to be, in a business sense and in a personal sense, I think the most needed skill set in today's world. I think one of the reasons why we're so polarized when we talk about politics or religion or whatever it is because we don't know how to talk to each other. We don't know how to disagree. We don't know how to exchange ideas in a civil manner. Everything turns into a fight. So I saw that growing up, and I've made it a mission to try and change that.
Love that. So tell me, like in that example that you are giving us, that it's very powerful, like looking at your parents having these type of fights and you being in the middle, how that, I know that that helped you to look for that also, but also how that affected you. Like, okay, I am not supposed to be the grown up here, and I am not supposed to be like in the middle, like helping them to understand each other. What maybe even things started to create it in you to start to see like, okay, I need to clean up that part, and then I can start to grow with the other part of the communication.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it was hard for many, many years. I struggled with that. It's something that I've had to get over to some extent. I have had to go through the process of forgiving my parents for, they did the best that they could, and they were great. They taught me a lot of great things. My dad, he was always a really hard worker, great provider. My mother made a lot of sacrifices for us. She would always drive us to the best schools, and she really always tried to keep us busy, try to keep us out of trouble. So, my upbringing was not all bad. It was just that my parents just couldn't communicate with each other. But I think what that turned me into, and my personality, that I think translates well to my industry, is it made me a problem solver. And I'm very comfortable being in the middle of two opposing parties. So in real estate, as an agent, that's what I do. I've got a buyer, I've got a seller, and they both want different things. They both want it one way, they want it another way. And that's what I lived every single day. So I think that's one of the blessings in disguise, if you will, that really makes me a good agent, is that I know how to referee. Like, I know how to try to find a win-win. I know how to communicate. I know how to interpret messages from one side to the other. And so I think it's one of the skill sets that, even though you're in an uncomfortable situation, the situation itself forces you to develop that skill set that later can be applied in other areas.
And I really, and you are giving us a lot of nuggets that are very powerful. And I'm going to be like, because the topic and this program is called Believe in Yourself, Believe in Your Business. So it's like, okay, what are the belief systems that is created, and how they are created are the ones that create us like the experts or that we are in one area. So you were talking something very powerful, saying I needed to learn to forgive my parents. How was that process of forgiving them? And what do you think was the before and after of that forgiveness? Like how, if you saw differences that started like, okay, I know you know, and you are comfortable in the middle of those type of, if we can say fights, even when it's not a fight in a real estate. But at the end, thinking about like, okay, when I wasn't forgiving them, I was just complaining about people fighting against each other. What happened after, before and after that situation with
That's
you?
a great question, and I appreciate it because nobody's ever asked me that before, and it's something that is near and dear to my heart. It's a process that I think very few people go through, and so initially it's anger. I was angry for a long time, and I blamed myself for my parents' divorce. I
Mm,
told myself that the reason why my parents got divorced was because I was not able to bring them together. And for
mm,
years, because I was the referee since I was 5 years old, I blamed myself. Every time they fought, every time I would always blame myself, and I just got angry and angry and angrier. But what I realized was that they did the best that they could, and they did a great job in so many areas.
yeah.
And I think that when you really take time to talk to your parents, like really have a conversation, and these are difficult, painful conversations. They're conversations where people get emotional, tears are shed, sometimes curse words are exchanged. Like these are high stakes, difficult emotional conversations. But if you can get there and just listen, what you will learn about your parents will surprise you. And
Mm,
I think once you try to understand why things happen the way that they happened, you develop a little bit of empathy, and you
mm,
realize that my parents have their own path, and they did the best that they could, and things don't work out sometimes, and that's okay. It's not my fault, and it's not my responsibility to keep somebody else's marriage together. I think that often we look at divorce as a tragedy, as just a massive failure, and without a doubt it has serious repercussions. I think especially when it happens when kids are young. But what I've
exactly.
learned is that divorce sometimes is the best option. It just is. There are relationships that just no longer work. And instead of clinging to that and trying to force something that maybe no longer fits, just accept the reality that maybe these two are better off apart. And I've seen that. I believe that my parents are better off separated. And we continue to have great relationships with both, but those two together just simply didn't work, and that's okay. That's life.
And really thank you for being so honest and open, because that it's, I know that it's going a little bit deep inside of what is happening, but also start to show the real Tony, and how you started to become so passionate about what you are doing, because it's like, okay, there was something that happened at some moment of the time that it's exactly what you are explaining right now, that created a new version of you, that suddenly, okay, from anger you move to prosperity. So how was that process? How long was that? Because I know that there are some people that is listening to us right now like, okay, maybe real estate is not something that I am looking for, but understanding the heart of somebody that is inside of that world, and understanding that this type of fight happens everywhere, every time, with everybody,
Yes.
like, so understanding how, okay, what was the process, because I want to hear that also, if you, for you was, okay, it was in one day when I was with with God, with the universe, and suddenly he opened my eyes, or it was a process of how much time to really get it and understand it and get to the awareness that you have right now?
I love that. Great question. So it took years, decades. I'm talking about, my relationship with my parents has really improved. I'd say over the last probably 3 or 4 years. I'm 32, so for the first 28 years of my life, it was tough. I held a lot of anger, resentment, guilt, blame, confusion, not knowing if could I have fixed this marriage? Could I have not? Was it doomed to fail anyway? But really what changed was when I had my son. So my son's 7 years old, and I realized how difficult parenting is.
Mm.
When I started having disagreements with my wife, and I started seeing that we had different ways of viewing the world, and on top of that, stress to pay the bills, stress to run a business, just stress all over the place, and trying to keep the boat afloat with my wife and my son, that really made me view my parents differently. And
Mm.
it's that cliche thing. I mean, in Spanish, there's often the joke that mothers say, "Cuando tengas hijos me vas a entender," right? They always say, "When you have your kids, you're gonna understand." And we kind of brush that off a little bit, or we think it's this cliche. But for me, it was absolutely true. Once I
Yeah.
had my son, I realized how difficult this parenting thing is, and how scary it is. I had to see my own insecurities, my own fears and doubts, and everybody reacts to stress differently. My
Yeah.
parents had one way, I have my way, my wife has her way. The world, like every individual out there, goes through similar situations. And so I think that allowed me to be much more empathetic, and instead of just blaming them and saying, "Hey, like parenting kind of sucks sometimes." Like it really does. There's some days where you're like, "Man, I do not like this at all." And how you cope with that. So I think making that connection and having the difficult conversations. Well, I often say when I'm on stage, I think everybody is 3 to 5 difficult conversations away from a new level of happiness. And I think that everybody can identify one,
Yeah.
2, or 3 conversations that you've been putting off that you should have. If you can bring yourself to have those conversations in an empathetic way, whatever, with whoever it is, you might not mend the relationship. It might not be perfect, but if you make that effort, what you'll learn as you have that is extraordinary. And I think that has been a big variable, just forcing myself to have difficult conversations when I would rather just run away.
Just last question on that area, because really I believe it's very profound, and I am learning a lot. So thank you again for being so honest and open. So this process of understanding all of this, and was something that you did by yourself, you did with learning from books, from learning from other coaches, from listening to mentors. How was the process for you?
Yeah. So part of it was study. So I'm a big believer of, if there's something you don't know, the answer is probably out there. You just have to find it. So I did start listening to a lot of dad podcasts and things like that. But if I'm being completely honest, I think what was mind opening for me was seeing my wife, because my wife, her parents also split up, but they split up when she was very, very young. So she
Mm.
was like 9 years old, and it was kind of messy. And they were in California. They moved to Utah, and seeing how she didn't allow that to make her bitter. She didn't allow that to make her hate her parents, or
Mm.
disown her parents. I think when I saw the grace with which she handled a situation that was honestly more difficult than mine, I would say, that kind of opened my eyes to, oh, like, okay, like it doesn't have to be that hard. I
Mm.
don't have to be angry. I don't have to hate my parents, because here's an example of somebody who went through something worse at a younger age, And she doesn't hate her parents. She has a great relationship with both. How does that work? How does that happen?
Wow.
So when I saw that, for me, it was just a great example of I can do it too. I can try to fix the relationship too. I can let go of this resentment and anger also. If she did, so can I.
And I love that, because that is one of the biggest things that we can do when we start to see others and start to compare. That it's like the law of relativity. Everything is relative depending on where are we. And that is part of the belief system. That's why I am doing this question, because it's like how you created this belief that, okay, people need to hear your story. You can work in the podcasting world, but at the same time, you can also work in the real estate, and they are separate. No, what with the story that you are telling is exactly like how they are merging together, and how they start to be part of the same thing. So if we start to talk about podcasting, because that's what we put to the title today, so everybody is like, okay, they don't tell me one thing and they're doing another thing. No, everything is connected. So in the podcasting world, what do you think was like the defining moment for you to understand that mixing both where something really the potential was there, and why there is a potential between podcasting and real estate?
Yeah, podcasting is one of my favorite topics. I'm actually president of the Utah Podcast Coalition. It's just a big group network of podcasters. And when I got into podcasting was early, like before podcasting was cool. I was doing podcasts back in 2015. And the
Wow.
reason why is because my dream job was always to be a sports commentator. That was always my dream job. Like I always wanted to be on TV. I always wanted to be on the radio talking about basketball and boxing and MMA. But what I started to realize early in my career, and here's where I think it starts to become more relevant to the audience. When I got into real estate, I was 21 years old. I was super skinny. I didn't have any facial hair. I looked like I was 15, honestly. I'd never run a business before. I didn't have any contacts. I didn't have a network. I didn't have anything. And when I started trying to go out and prospect, it was difficult for me to gain people's trust. It was difficult for people to take me seriously because I hadn't been in the industry for very long. I was super young. I didn't have experience. I mean, the average realtor here in Utah is a 56-year-old white woman, just by demographic. That's just what it is. I was a 21-year-old Mexican kid. And so it was difficult. But what I realized was that podcasting, if there was a business owner, for example, and I wanted to approach a business owner, or I wanted to approach someone who was running for office, if I just said, hey, I'm a realtor, will you talk to me? They were going to talk to me. But when I started a podcast and I really took it seriously, and I realized that if I could highlight other people, give people a space to tell their story, now they would take my phone call. Now they would answer my email. And so that was kind of my way to meet new people, to meet people in the community that it would have been, honestly, it would have been very difficult for me to approach if I didn't have this podcast that I could say, hey, I have a show. I'd love for you to be on my show. All of a sudden, I was getting business owners and wealthy investors and people that were running for office, like influential people in my community that I could network with, meet, shake hands with, create relationships and friendships with. And that eventually led to large amounts of business. But that's kind of where my tie to podcasting started, is just thinking, if there's a business owner, how do I approach you? Well, like I don't have any value. Starting a legitimate, serious podcast gave me that value that I could offer to somebody in my community.
Awesome. And how that helped you to start to create this part that in every business is key, that is trust and authority. How that created that, and how that helped you to create that?
So what I realized was that I needed to get people on to my social media to demonstrate that I knew what I was talking about. So early on in my career, what I started doing was, since I didn't have budgets, I didn't have studios, I didn't have cameras, every time somebody asked me a question, a real estate question, I would grab my phone, Facebook, and I would answer the question on a Facebook page. This was before the days of Instagram. Facebook didn't even have pages yet. It was just your profile. So I started doing that. Once I started doing the show, I would post the links from my pages. By this point, Instagram was kind of a thing. So everybody that watched the show had to get it from my profile. They could search it and things like that, but most people, when I would like tag the guests, they would share it, they would repost it. So all of a sudden, there was this flood of traffic to my profile. Once I knew that there were eyes that were going to be there, even if they weren't there for me, they were there for the guest. But I had a split second, I had a small window of opportunity to provide some value. So if they went to my Instagram and they were going to click on the link in bio or whatever, but they saw that I had good real estate content, my bet was maybe some of those people will be compelled to give me a follow and they'll see my stuff. And when they start seeing me talk about appraisals or talk about programs or talk about neighborhoods, I might just maybe I'll be able to provide that value and maybe they'll choose me to be their realtor. And without a doubt, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and that maybe opens the door for everything. At the end, if we enter in the world of quantum, it's exactly that. It's like, what are the possibilities? Okay, you are here, but the possibilities are infinite. And when you start to open the door for the infinite possibilities, everything changes. So that is really powerful. What, in your experience now with all these years, because since 2019 you started with podcasting, right?
It's been a while, yeah. Well, I started my first podcast back in 2015, 2016, right after I got married.
Awesome. So what is, like, for you, the key elements that make a real estate podcast truly engaging and valuable for the listeners?
Yeah, so it depends what the goal is. So if there's somebody out there that wants to podcast, the first thing you have to think about is, what is the goal? And when I say what is the goal, what I mean by that is, who is the actual audience? Is the audience other agents? Is the audience people in your community? Is it a lead gen? Are you going to interview? Are you going to do a solo cast? Like, what is really the objective? Too often people start podcasts and then stop doing it. I think one of the reasons why they stop doing it is because there is no legitimate established goal from the beginning. So if you want to scale a show, I think the best way to do so is through interviews in your community. And that's, I think, the best way to also lead to deals, because that's how you're going to meet more people. Because very few people ever get that kind of attention, if you will. Very few people ever get an opportunity to be on a show like this, to be on a podcast, to be on television, to be on radio. Most people never get that kind of attention. So what I found was, if I could provide that for people in my community, I mean, I've had people do watch parties, like literally invite people to their house, make food just to watch their podcast episode. So it means so much to the individual that they share it everywhere. They share it, their mom shares it, their family shares it, everybody shares it, because they're so excited that they had this chance to be on a show. Maybe for me and you, it's very normal. We do shows every week or whatever. But for most people, it's rare, it's exciting, and they love it. And so that was the way that I could provide value, meet new people, create new relationships that then led to business.
And that's the second area that I want to enter, like this part of networking and continue with the networking and trust. What do you feel that it's like the most effective part? And I want to start to mix the networking with the work in the real estate. Like, okay, you were talking at the beginning, like, okay, I have these two guys that have a different approach and they have a different win version. Mm-hmm. This guy is selling their house, but they want to sell it at a higher price, and the guy that is buying wants to buy it very cheap. So you have these both things, but at the same time, you are creating with the podcasting like a network that help you to create trust, to create other things. How like the three things start to work together?
Yeah, I think having the podcast, number one, will improve your own communication skills. So if you are a good interviewer, you know how to ask proper questions, which is the same thing that you're going to do when you're having a buyer consultation, a listing presentation. You want to ask the correct questions. A good interviewer can get information from the guest. They have that ability. Not everybody knows how to interview. People can have their own podcast, but there are people that just don't know how to interview. Interviewing is a skill in and of itself because you have to be able to pick up on things that somebody said, know when to dive into a topic, know when to skip over a topic. And so what it forced me to do is learn how to have a dialogue, how to hold conversations, how to, again, ask proper questions, build on the information that I've received. So that made me a more effective negotiator, maybe a more effective representative for my clients because I got very good at learning their why, what their motivations were, why they wanted to be in a certain area, why they wanted a certain price point, why the house had to have 3 bedrooms upstairs and 2 bedrooms downstairs. Like what goes into that? When I was on the negotiating side, same thing. What questions do you ask an agent on the other side to try to get a feel for what the seller is looking for, whoever's on the other side of the transaction, and try to create the win-win? So it's just practice. You're going to sit down and you're going to have a dialogue with someone. It's practice. It makes you a better public speaker. It sharpens your communication, your conversational skills, and that absolutely translated to business. So once I was able to build a little bit of trust and I was able to learn how to ask proper questions, now whenever somebody came to me and I had these business meetings, they went much better because I knew I had been trained on how to hold effective dialogue.
And that is key again in the part of the belief system that you created, because it's something like, for example, in persuasion, I am a person that I help people to understand how to use persuasion, but not to deceive somebody because I want the win, I win, and the other lose. It's about win-win, as you are saying. But in the persuasion, you need to prepare yourself and you need to understand what is the needs in every part and why they are, and what you are saying. It's the why, understanding what is the motivator in each of the areas. And finally, with that understanding, and that I am just emphasizing there, because that is key in the belief system that you created in you, and with everybody that wants to improve. And this is a skill that everybody needs. It doesn't matter if they are selling or not. We sell even to our kids, so we are selling all the time. That part of understanding what is the motivator of my kid and why he is pushing for this little toy, and why my wife doesn't want to give him the toy. So suddenly you can start to play the game in the middle. And also, of course, in business, it's more relevant. In this part, like, okay, you are saying practice and doing, for example, I remember when I started coaching, and I am a high performance coach. When I started coaching, I was like, okay, the best way that you can do when you are coaching is ask powerful questions. So I want to ask you that to you. How do you learn to ask powerful questions in your area, like with what you have been learning, including the interviewing and the real estate?
So as it pertains to podcasting, specifically being a good host, when you talk about asking proper questions, for anybody out there that wants to start a podcast and you want to interview people, here's what I would recommend. Number one, do your homework. Do your homework on your guest. If when you sit down to interview someone, that's the first time you ever talk to them, that's the first time you've heard of them at all, it's not going to be a very good interview. I mean, you and I have been going back and forth on LinkedIn for weeks. And so as when we sit down to have the conversation, you've done your homework. So you know a little bit about me. You kind of know what questions you would like to ask. You have some bullet points. If you have the proper bullet points and you develop the skill set to, as the answers start to flow, You know where to stop, where to dive in, when to move on. You can extract all of that information. So in the same way, if I'm talking to a buyer or a seller, over time, you get the experience of what matters most. And there are very specific questions. If you're talking to a seller, why do you want to sell? Why not stay? What are your motivations? What's going to happen after? What are your goals? Buyers, what area do you want to be in? Why that area? Why that kind of house? Why that price point? Why that neighborhood? And so as you develop these skills, now you can get the information that you need. And as a real estate agent, once I get that info, I know what to do with it to help the individual reach whatever goal they just shared that they have.
And quick question, in the beginning, when you start to have these type of conversations, how is the approach to secure that the other side wants to give you the answer? Because it's like right now, it's like, yeah, of course, I want to ask you the why and I want to know the why. But the other part can be like, okay, why do you care? Like, why you are asking me this? I am thinking about with the audience that is listening, is like, okay, awesome. You have these questions of why, but how I start to really create this rapport that starts to create the connection that the other person is going to share those stories.
Yeah, that is a very insightful question. So I commend you on that question. You've asked a couple questions that nobody's ever asked me before, but I think it's understanding that in my case, if there's a buyer that is in front of me that took the time to come to a buyer consultation, it's because they need something or they want something. If I go to a listing presentation to somebody that booked it and at least mentioned that they wanted to sell their house enough to have a meeting, it's because they want something. There's something that they feel that they need. If they didn't feel that way, you wouldn't be in that conversation in the first place. So when I realized that, okay, this person that is across from me wants to accomplish something. Sometimes it's buy a property, sell a property, invest, flip a home, buy a rental, buy an Airbnb. There's something there that they want to accomplish. When I tell that individual that my goal is to learn as much about them as possible so that I can help them achieve their goal, people open up. Because as you say, if somebody doesn't know why I'm asking you all these questions, they might think it's a little bit awkward. No doubt. Nobody likes to get interrogated. But when you come from a situation of, I'm very good at what I do and I want to help you to the best of my abilities, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions? I've rarely had somebody shut me off or not want to talk to me because they feel genuinely that I want to help them, and that information that they're going to give me is going to allow me to do that at a higher level.
And I am going to emphasize in the part that you are saying genuinely. It's like you are authentic, and that is something that people feel. It's like I can be saying whatever, but really until you have this genuinity and this authenticity, suddenly the other person is going to open and is going to create. And it's not a question. It's really your frequency, the way that you are, the way that you are thinking and talking and doing everything. So that's very important. Give me 1 second. Wait. So let's move to the part of sales psychology, because we are talking a lot about sales psychology right now and how sales work. And I know that we have 10 minutes, but that's part of what we are talking about. How understanding the sales psychology, how understanding how to approach them, how to interview them, how to make powerful questions, improve everything in your business.
So in my opinion, it's the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that matters because nobody likes to be sold, but everybody likes to buy. And if you don't know what the person across from you is trying to accomplish, you can't fulfill a need that you don't understand. And so selling real estate is vastly different from selling a product or selling t-shirts or selling supplements or whatever it is. Because for most people, it's the largest financial investment they'll make in their lives. Not everybody, but for most people, it's the biggest investment. And so there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of fear, there's also a lot of hope behind this thing called a real estate transaction, whether it's buyer or seller. And so what I have tried to convey is that in order to help you, I need to understand you. And this is going to be different with whatever you're selling. If you sell coffee, if someone, they just want coffee, bro. Like it's not that deep, right? Not everything is that deep. But real estate, in my opinion, is a little bit deeper than selling, say, jeans or t-shirts. It means more. There's more at stake. Sometimes, I mean, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars, life savings. I mean, there is a lot at stake. Deposits that are thousands of dollars that could be lost if I don't do a good job. So I've really grown to have a healthy respect for the process. And yeah, I mean, if you don't understand the psychology side, what motivates somebody, if you can't develop empathy to put yourself in that person's shoes, to understand what goes with a transaction, the second thoughts, the fear, the anxiety, when they start looking at the numbers, when they start realizing that, okay, a lot of their savings are going to go into this. They're not going to have those savings anymore. Like there's just so much behind it where it's highly stressful, highly emotional. I mean, there are stats, and you guys can quote me on this, but one of the most stressful experiences that a human can have, I think it's in the top 10 or top 5, is purchasing a property. So I know that. So my job, if I'm a good agent, is to take some of that stress off of you, to show you how to do this correctly so that you can sleep at night and you can know that everything is going to be okay.
And I love that. At the end, you are becoming like a coach for them or a psychologist for them to understand how to improve. And really, I know that you're in the real estate, and that's why you're saying, okay, this is the high stake. I agree in a certain amount when you are saying, like, okay, I am putting all my savings, and I am going to have like everything there. But at the same time, that happens also with every profession. If you take it like that, like take it like, okay, if I am a coach, I have to understand that I have to help you the best way possible. I have to prepare you and have to take out all the layers that are affecting you, are not helping you to see the reality outside. So at the end becomes like, okay, in one you're giving me your life money, in the other one you're giving me your life. So it's like suddenly
it goes back to what I said. Yeah, nobody likes to be sold, but everybody wants to buy. So exactly. Of course, if you have coaching clients, they're trying to accomplish something. Maybe that's grow their business or whatever it is, but exactly. there is a need or a desire behind the individual that you need to understand at a very deep level.
I am saying it now because it's for people that are listening. Like at the end, what you created for you is this powerful belief that you are really helping them to become better and to take the best decision, and you want them to see that in their faces. So that is what everything creates. So that is exactly like the center or the nucleus or the powerhouse of everything that you're saying. So let's start with how people can reach you, how they can know more about you, how they can contact you if they want to contact you.
Absolutely. So I'm on pretty much all social media platforms. The one that I spend the most time on at this point in time is on Instagram. So whether you speak English or Spanish, in Spanish, the handle is tonyacosta.es. That one is heavy on real estate content. The other profile that I have for my English speakers is tonyacosta.us. And there I share a lot of, speaker tips, TEDx events, when I'm speaking, things of that nature, also a lot of real estate stuff. But yeah, without a doubt, I mean, if I can be of value to anybody, if anybody out there wants to be a public speaker, wants to communicate better, wants to be a real estate agent, if there's anything that I can do to provide some value, happy to do it.
Awesome. These last 5 minutes that we have, I would love to hear from you. Like, okay, if people were like, okay, podcasting, real estate, psychology, sales, and it's like, okay, if you want them to have like something that this is what I want you to remember about everything that we talked today, what could be that?
Yeah, I would say that you need to realize whatever business you're in, business is about people. It's about people. And if you don't understand people, if you don't know how to talk to people, if you don't know how to listen to people, then you're not going to do very well. Whether you sell $1 million properties or you sell corn dogs, like it doesn't matter. You can sell snow cones, like whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's about people. So the more that you can put in the work to understand people, learn how to talk, learn how to listen, learn how to have engaging conversations, the better you're going to do. More people are going to trust you. More people are going to like you. More people are going to want to do business with you. More people are going to refer you to their friends and family. But I think that the human element is often forgotten. We see everybody as a number, just a number on a spreadsheet, but these are human beings. Your customers are human beings with feelings and hopes and fears and anxieties and desires that it's in your best interest to try to understand that.
Yeah, at the end, it's the core of everything. And that's the reason of the show, saying at the end, the belief system that you have is the one that is going to help you to catapult your experience and everything, or it's going to keep you down because you are not growing and you are like feeling very little. And really, thank you for being so open and honest. For me, it was very, very, very powerful what you share. I know that it gave a lot of value to everybody that was listening to us. So thank you very much. I commend you for that because it was really, really profound, and I love that. So thank you, Tony. Everybody, this program, Believe in Yourself, Believe in Your Business, is exactly what we are looking for, is that you start to understand that those beliefs that you have are helping you to improve or helping you to not improve and not to see the real problems. So this show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and leave it. Thank you, Tony, and thank you all. See you next time.
Thank you.